Chapter 2861. She didn't dare to think too much about it. She only knew that she couldn't leave with Rollercoasters. She had never been afraid of anything, but at this moment, she felt afraid. She hugged Lan Yu and whispered, "Lan Yu, I'm afraid that my decision is wrong." "How could it be?" Lan Yu patted her back and said, "Chen, I can give up everything for you, even if it's..." Before he could say the word life, his lips were covered by her. "Don't say it." She pursed her lips and looked at him with a gentleness that he had never seen before. He smiled, "All right, I won't say it." He reached out and held her in his arms, murmuring, Chen, you must promise me not to give up." He looked at her, suddenly picked her up and threw her on the bed like a madman. When he leaned over, Chen covered his lips. "Lan Yu, what are you doing?" Lan Yu pressed her hands to the side of his body and bit open the buttons one by one, murmuring, "In that case, I have to keep the Lan family's descendants." He was actually joking and wanted to be intimate with her. He saw that she was in a bad mood, so he wanted to comfort her. Chen took it seriously. She struggled for a while but couldn't break free, so she bit her lips and said, "Lan Yu, stop fooling around. We can't have children." "Why?" He kissed her indiscriminately, but he could smell the faint smell of blood on her. He paused in his movements and looked at her with a deep gaze. Chen bit her lips. "At least not now." She softened her voice, broke free from his hands and stroked his handsome face. "We will have children in the future. Lan Yu, listen to me, okay?" She was worried about his safety, and she didn't want to have a child at this time. Lan Yu looked at her for a while and smiled. Okay. He was just fooling around with her. Although he was a little embarrassed now, he had lost his interest. He got up and kissed her. "I'm going to wash my hands and cook for you. What do you want to eat?" Chen closed his eyes and let him kiss him. He smiled and said, "I like everything you cook." Lan Yu smiled. "Seafood baked rice with a little more flavor and soup." "Oh." She reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Do it well." His gaze became deeper. "Actually, there are some things that I can do better. Do you want to try it tonight?" He kissed her suggestively before walking into the bathroom. As soon as he entered the bathroom, before he could clean himself up, he received a text message on his phone. Lan Yu took a look. It was a photo. Chen was lying on the bed with a man on top of him. They were kissing, and the scene was beautiful. Chen was wearing spaghetti-strap pajamas, the very sexy kind. Lan Yu clenched his fists and looked in the direction of the bedroom. At this time, his gaze fell on the trash can again. He squatted down and picked up the pajamas from it. The pajamas with blood stains and a man's shirt. It should be Rollercoasters because the brand was so cool. He looked at it attentively. He didn't know when Chen had stood at the door of the bathroom. She said calmly, "Do you trust me?" Lan Yu looked at her sideways, stood up and handed the phone to her silently. Chen only took a look at it and returned it to him. When Lan Yu took the phone, he grabbed her hand and pulled her into his arms. Chen, I'm sorry." He kissed her hair and hugged her tightly. "It won't happen again. I won't let you see these things again." Chen was a little breathless from his hug, but she thought that he might have misunderstood something. Chapter 2862. Lan Yu hugged her even tighter. His face was buried in her hair and he said in a low voice, Chen, it's not like that." He wasn't an old-fashioned man who would think that it was the woman's fault for losing her innocence. On the contrary, it was his negligence and he didn't protect her well. However, he was still very happy and thankful. Even if she didn't say it, he could almost imagine the situation at that time. She made his heart ache. Lan Yu hugged her for a long time before he said in a low voice, I'm going to cook. However, Qin Chen hugged him. I'll go with you. He looked at her and smiled. Okay. He carried her downstairs, naturally. Qin Chen sat in the dining room and watched him cook. She said softly, Lan Yu, I'm fine. I can protect myself. You don't have to blame yourself. She could tell that he was blaming himself. Lan Yu turned around and gave her a comforting smile. Then he said softly, I'll protect you in the future. He was stunned for a moment before he walked over and hugged her gently. He buried his face and whispered, Promise me, Chen Chen. Don't go see him again. Qin Chen rested her face on his shoulder and said, I promise you. Lan Yu looked at her and pinched her face. He said softly, Good girl. Qin Chen smiled. Let's forget about Lan Yu, okay? She hugged him tightly. Nothing happened. Rong Lei was injured. Lan Yu's body was a little stiff, but he didn't show it. He just smiled and said, I know. He cooked for her. After eating, he threw the clothes in the trash can upstairs. When he came back, he looked at her and said, Don't you want to go shopping? I'll go with you. Qin Chen nodded and followed him into the car. It was something that they had been looking forward to for a long time, but because of what happened today, they were a little depressed. Especially Qin Chen, his expression was a little indifferent, and he didn't speak along the way. Lan Yu parked the car in the parking lot of a shopping mall. He turned his head and whispered, Chen Chen, if you're in a bad mood, let's do it another day. She shook her head. No, let's go up. She hugged his arm and smiled at him, I want to go shopping. She was wearing his black shirt today, which made her look a lot more casual, but still masculine. Lan Yu smiled and leaned over to kiss her. His voice was low and husky. Okay. He unbuckled his seatbelt and got out of the car, then went around to the other side to open the door for her. After she got out of the car, Lan Yu held her hand. Qin Chen glanced at him. Lan Yu said in a low voice, Chen Chen, I don't care about those looks. He tightened his grip on her hand and walked into the elevator. From this moment on, he wanted to be with her and let the whole world know that he was with Qin Chen. There were several people in the elevator. When they came in and out, everyone looked at them. Not only did Lan Yu not avoid her, but he also put her on his shoulder. Both of them were good-looking. This scene was not only not unbearable, but also very pleasing to the eye. Qin Chen instinctively wanted to struggle, but Lan Yu held her down. Chen Chen. She looked up at him. His hand held hers, and his eyes were full of determination. Qin Chen smiled faintly and held his hand. At this moment, she felt loved. This was probably the craziest day for Qin Chen. She went to the women's clothing department and tried on the women's clothes one by one. Chapter 2863. The waitress went from shock to amazement. She slowly relaxed. Casual wear, formal wear, pajamas, nothing was left out. Lan Yu's card was about to be maxed out. Qin Chen leaned on his shoulder. Women are scary when they squander. I just found out. After Lan Yu signed, he pinched her chin. This is not as good as your previous set of cups. Qin Chen tilted her head. So men are scarier when they squander. What kind of man are you? Lan Yu chuckled and pulled her downstairs. On the second floor, Qin Chen could no longer move. Lan Yu looked at her. What are you looking at? Qin Chen pointed at the wigs. Will you buy them for me? Lan Yu's gaze paused on the wigs. Do you want them? Yes. She nodded vigorously, acting coquettishly. Lan Yu smiled. He looked at her, then at the wigs. Finally, he took one and put it on for her. It was still short, but it was very pretty. Once she put it on, she looked completely different. Lan Yu's gaze was a little dazed. After a long time, he pulled her to the mirror. Is it weird? Qin Chen asked with a smile. Lan Yu didn't say anything. He just brought her to the mirror. In the mirror, she looked like herself. Qin Chen held her breath. She had worn women's clothes before, but now she had changed her hairstyle. She couldn't believe it. Chen Chen, I like you like this. Lan Yu murmured. Very cute. Qin Chen tilted her head. No one has ever said that I am cute. Then from now on, there will be. He kissed her cheek. Every day. Qin Chen hugged him and didn't say anything. She felt that this happiness and sweetness was unreal. She was afraid that in the blink of an eye, he would disappear and she would return to her original self. It turned out that being loved and truly embraced was such a blissful feeling. Lan Yu, we will always be together, right? She asked in a low voice. Lan Yu smiled. Of course. Qin Chen, on the other hand, felt very cold. This night, they go home. In his luxurious king-sized bed, they made love to each other again and again, until late into the night. In the middle of the night, Lan Yu woke up, but there was no one beside him. He touched it, opened his eyes and turned on the light. Qin Chen was not in the bedroom. He put on a pair of pajama pants and walked out. He saw Qin Chen standing by the window of the living room, smoking. She rarely smoked, except for drinking some coffee. She could be considered a person with extreme self-control. However, she was smoking in the middle of the night. Lan Yu knew that she had something on her mind, and it was related to Rollercoasters. He walked over and hugged her from behind, murmuring, "Why aren't you sleeping?" Qin Chen tilted his head and smiled slightly. "What about you? Can't sleep either." "No, it's because you're not by my side." He hugged her tightly and put his face on the side of her neck, kissing her. Qin Chen put out the cigarette. "Let's sleep together." Lan Yu tilted his head and looked at her. "Chen Chen." "Yes, what's up?" Qin Chen turned around and hugged his neck. Lan Yu thought for a moment and said slowly, "I may have a battle with Rollercoasters." Under her gaze, he smiled bitterly. "You should know the power of the Rong family in France and their businesses all over the world." Qin Chen nodded. "I will ask my brother to help you." Chapter 2864. Lan Yu wasn't someone who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He didn't think that a Grand Hyatt could stop a big French family. Especially when Rollercoasters might have some unknown secrets. Qin Chen buried her face in his neck and suddenly said in a trembling voice, "Lan Yu, I'm scared." She had never been so vulnerable. She had always been indifferent to life and death because she had experienced too much. But now, she was particularly afraid that he would be hurt, especially when this person was someone she used to care about so much. If Lan Yu was hurt, she would blame herself. Lan Yu held her in his arms and comforted her gently. "Don't be afraid, Chen Chen. I'll be fine." She looked at him and asked, "You promise?" He smiled slightly and said, "I promise." Qin Chen then went to bed with him, but she didn't feel sleepy when she lay in bed. He patted her back and comforted her while whispering, "Chen Chen, don't smoke in the future." "You don't like it?" She asked softly and put her little face on his shoulder. "I thought you would say that I'm manly." Lan Yu didn't expect her to be naughty, so he patted her gently and said, "I mean, we will have children in the future. Smoking is not good for children." "Children?" Qin Chen was stunned for a moment. They had taken precautions recently, so they wouldn't have children. Besides, she wouldn't allow them to have children now. Although she thought so, she still nodded and said, "Okay, I won't smoke in the future." He kissed her with satisfaction and said, "Go to sleep." Qin Chen closed her eyes, but she didn't fall asleep for a long time. She was afraid that he would be worried, so she didn't open her eyes. Lan Yu naturally knew that, but it was good for her to close her eyes and rest. He went to smoke. The two of them had their own thoughts and didn't fall asleep until it was almost dawn. Later, Lan Yu became very busy. Even with Yi Muyun's support, Lan Yu was still surrounded by enemies. The Rong family's influence was everywhere, especially in Grand Hyatt's overseas business, which was beyond the reach of Boyi Group. Lan Yu became a flying man. Qin Chen could only see him for 2 or 3 days a week, but she didn't complain and waited for him in the villa. Originally, she wanted to fly with him but was rejected by Lan Yu. He said it was too hard. What Qin Chen didn't know was that Lan Yu was thinking about something else. He was afraid that Rong Lei would do something during his flight, and he was afraid that Qin Chen would be implicated. He did not dare to put her in danger. Even if something happened to him, he wanted her to be well. This time, it wasn't him and Rong Lei fighting over a woman, it was him, Lan Yu, who wanted to use his life to protect a woman. In his intuition, Rong Lei not only wanted Qin Chen, but also his ambition. Although he was tired of dealing with them, he did not suffer a crushing defeat. Just like that, a month passed, and the situation in B City became particularly tense because of the confrontation between the two sides. The Rong family used their diplomatic relations, and the pressure on Grand Hyatt Group doubled. If it weren't for the support of Zhou Chongguang and Yi Muyun, it would have collapsed long ago. At night, in the largest club in B City. In a private room, Lan Yu and Yi Muyun sat separately. Yi Muyun put a document in front of Lan Yu and said in a low voice, "I hope this will be useful to you." Lan Yu did not open it immediately, but lit a cigarette and smoked slowly. The Rong family promised Mr. Lin to fully support his re-election. Chapter 2865. He paused for a moment. This is the evidence of the collusion between the Rong family and the Lin family. The higher-ups have also noticed it. If the Lin family can be defeated, Rong Lei will have one less backer in the country, and it will be much more difficult for him to do things. As he said this, he looked at Lan Yu. But it may be that your overseas career will be severely damaged. Lan Yu, have you thought about it? Lan Yu smiled. Qin Chen doesn't care about that. His face was surprisingly gentle. She likes the dishes I cook and the paintings I draw. What I have now can also let her live her previous life, but now she likes to live a simple life. Yi Muyun agreed with this point. Recently, Qin Chen seemed to have changed. He used to be extremely luxurious, but now he seemed to have returned to simplicity. He thought for a moment. Take these back and have a good look. As for the next step, think about it carefully. Yi Muyun's voice became a little hoarse. Rong Lei is a dangerous person. You have to be careful. Lan Yu nodded, picked up the things, and stood up. But when he held the door handle, he suddenly turned his head. Brother, after this matter is over, I want to marry Qin Chen. Yi Muyun smiled lightly. As long as Qin Chen is willing, it's fine. Lan Yu's eyes were a little warm. Thank you. Yi Muyun also stood up, walked over, and patted Lan Yu's shoulder. No, we should thank you. Thank you for giving Qin Chen love. Thank you for not giving up on her. Others didn't know how much Lan Yu had done for Qin Chen, but Yi Muyun was very clear about it. Lan Yu was moved. Because I love her. I have loved her since a long time ago. With that, he walked out. Half a month later, under Lan Yu's action, Mr. Lin fell from power and was imprisoned. Madame Lin suddenly fell ill. Lin Cece disappeared. She was nowhere to be seen. The Rome family's domestic enterprises withdrew one after another. Rollercoasters suddenly lost his original status in Beast City and no longer had the ability to summon wind and rain. That night, Lanyu returned to the villa. Qin Chen was there. She was sleeping on her side. Her hair had grown a lot longer and was a little messy as it stuck to her face. And he realized that she had put on some weight. He smiled and pinched her face. "Piggy." Qin Chen opened his eyes. When he could see clearly, he reached out and hugged him. "Lanyu, you're back." "I'm back." His voice was hoarse. It had been half a month since they last met. He leaned against the headboard and held her in his arms. "Did you miss me?" "I want to." Qin Chen propped himself up. "But you never come back." She was very worried, but she didn't dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, he would be even more worried outside. Looking at him now, she found that he had lost a lot of weight. She reached out to touch his face and murmured, "It's hard, isn't it?" He took her hand and rubbed it a few times. Then he smiled. "It's okay." Qin Chen hugged him tightly. "Lanyu." "Chen." He hugged her tightly. "Everything is over. The higher-ups have already ordered Rollercoasters to leave the country within 3 days. He won't have the chance to hurt you again." Qin Chen smiled slightly. And she knew how difficult it was. Mr. Lin had fallen. He was such a powerful figure. Speaking of which, if she hadn't saved Mr. Lin, Rollercoasters might not have had the chance to be like this. Lanyu probably knew what she was thinking. He smiled. If it wasn't Mr. Lin, there would be someone else. Qin Chen thought of Lin Cece. She didn't know where she went. Chapter 2866. When Madame Lin came, Lanyu avoided her, so Qin Chen saw her. Qin Chen made a cup of coffee for Madame Lin and put it in front of her. He smiled and said, "Madam, you have lost a lot of weight recently." Madame Lin held the cup and looked at Qin Chen with a haggard face. She said, "Dr. Qin is a smart person. I think you know why I am here." Qin Chen would not admit it directly. He just smiled and said, "Lin Cece has not been here." Madame Lin's lips moved. She looked embarrassed. After a while, she said in a low voice, "I am not here because of Cece. I am here for old Lin." Madame Lin said. Her tears finally fell. She knelt in front of Qin Chen and said, "Dr. Qin, I beg you to save old Lin again. He was just confused and cooperated with Rollercoasters. Old Lin's body is not good. I am afraid that he will die if he is locked up." Qin Chen's heart was touched. She stepped forward and helped Madame Lin up. She lowered her eyes and said, "It's not that I don't want to help Madame, but I don't want to interfere in this matter. Moreover, Madame Lin should also know the cause and effect of this matter. If there is anything that offended you, it is because we were forced to do so." Madame Lin wiped her tears and said, "I know. I don't really understand what's going on, but I've already advised old Lin to stay away from Rollercoasters' evil spirit. But old Lin is already so old, yet he still wants to be in a higher position. I'm not blaming Mr. Lan, I'm just here to beg Dr. Qin to show mercy and let old Lin enjoy his old age. Even if it's in a small town, I promise we won't appear in Beast City again." Madame Lin was a beautiful woman. She was crying like a pear blossom in the rain. Qin Chen sighed in his heart. He was probably used to being a man. Now he even had tender feelings for the fairer sex. But she could not make the decision on this matter. A retired Mr. Lin wouldn't cause much trouble, but she still had to listen to Lanyu when it came to the stakes. She did not agree, nor did she refuse. She only lightly said, "I will talk to Lanyu." Madam Lin should go back first. I will reply to you when there is news. When Madam Lin heard this, she sighed in her heart. She had always liked Qin Chen. Now that she knew he was a woman and treated her so politely, she felt even more reluctant. If Dr. Qin was a man and could be with Cece, she wouldn't have to worry so much. Madam Lin left with a touch of regret. Qin Chen sat there and drank the rest of the coffee. Lan Yu walked over and sat at the place where Madam Lin was sitting. Qin Chen looked at him. I'll make you another cup of coffee. All right. Lan Yu took out a cigarette from the pack on the coffee table and smoked it calmly. He smiled as he watched her skillfully brew coffee. Chen Chen, in the future, if you don't want to be a doctor, you might as well open a coffee shop. Qin Chen made the coffee and smiled. You don't like my profession? He shook his head. No, it's just that I think you like to make coffee more. Qin Chen still smiled. Aren't you afraid that with my pickiness, I will spend all your money in less than half a year? Thinking about it, if she sold a cup of coffee for a few thousand yuan, wouldn't he go bankrupt? Lan Yu smiled. It's not that bad. He walked over, put the cigarette in his mouth, and hugged her from behind. Chapter 2867. Did you say so? Qin Chen smiled and then concentrated on making a cup of excellent coffee for him. Lan Yu took a sip and looked at her. Very good. Qin Chen smiled and sat down. She hesitated for a moment and said, You heard what Madam Lin said just now. What are you going to do? Lan Yu put down the cup in his hand and held her slender hand. He rubbed it a few times and said, Are you soft-hearted? Qin Chen shook her head. No, I just think that if Mr. Lin is no longer in danger, it is better to do him a favor. After all, he is no longer there, but some forces in the circle are still there. It is better to leave some leeway. Lan Yu fixed his eyes on her and said slowly, It is impossible for him to return to the center of power. It will not hinder us. Chen Chen, what you said is also good. Leave some leeway. Qin Chen smiled. He looked at her indifferent look and pinched her face. Why are you not happy? Didn't you ask for it on behalf of others? She was still indifferent. You also said that I asked for it on behalf of others. If you want to get benefits, you may have to ask Madam Lin or Lin Cece. As long as you don't think Madam Lin is old and you don't think Lin Cece is mischievous, I have no opinion. Lan Yu stared at her. I think you are the one who is more and more mischievous. Qin Chen snorted softly. You probably didn't notice Madam Lin's regretful expression when she saw me. She still wants you to be her son-in-law. Lan Yu looked at her and then held her in his arms. His hands were unruly. Let me check if you have the hardware facilities. Qin Chen was afraid of tickles. She couldn't resist it even when she pushed against him. While they were fooling around, her shirt was pulled down by him and a large area of white skin was revealed. Lan Yu's eyes were slightly deep. Qin Chen looked at him and pulled her clothes. Don't mess around. I have something serious to tell you. Lan Yu chuckled and kissed her lips. This is also a serious matter. Just as he was about to act recklessly, the door to the living room was pushed open. It was none other than Lan Yu's mother. Lan Yu's mother stared blankly at them fooling around, a little stunned. Although Qin Chen still had short hair and was still wearing a shirt, she felt that she was a girl at first sight. Moreover, it was an excessively beautiful young lady. Blue mother's eyes were flashed, old face a red. I'll go downstairs to cook for you. When she came, how could Lan Yu continue to do it? He coughed softly and said, Mom, I'll go. He paused for a moment. Have a chat with Qin Chen. He could tell that his mother wasn't against it, so he spoke up at the right time. Blue mother is a little uncomfortable. Qin Chen straightened his clothes, his face a little hot. Let's go downstairs together. She thought for a moment. Auntie, would you like some coffee? Lan Yu knocked her on the head and said, don't do that. Go and make a cup of tea. Blue Mother thought that Qin Chen would be angry. She didn't know that Qin Chen just looked at her son and went downstairs to make tea. She looked at Lan Yu, who was tidying up his clothes, and asked quietly, can this hospital inject estrogen? I think this girl is very different. Lan Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mom, Qin Chen is a girl. I just like to wear neutral clothes. Blue Mother couldn't help but complain, where is the neutral clothes? That's men's clothes. Chapter 2868. Blue Mother said, and asked uneasily, can you have a child? Lan Yu glanced at his mother. I've already said that Qin Chen is a girl. She's no different from other girls. Blue Mother listened to him, also a little relieved, sighed, you are like this, I am also satisfied. Don't ask your wife to be more filial, as long as you like it and live a happy life. Lan Yu smiled and went downstairs with his mother. Qin Chen's coffee is good, and the tea is naturally good. Blue Mother looks at her movements, which is really pleasing to the eye. Moreover, at this time, Qin Chen looks a little like a noble son. She sighs in her heart. If Lan Ting is here, Qin Chen is also her ideal son-in-law candidate. At the thought of her daughter, she was relieved about Lan Yu's affairs. Now they have only one son, and the most important thing is that his son is happy. Blue Mother drank the tea made by Qin Chen. Qin Chen didn't look like a little daughter-in-law at all. It was always light, but Blue Mother was also at ease. When she came, she didn't prepare. When she drank tea, she remembered it. So she took off an emerald bracelet on her hand and put it in the palm of Qin Chen. I don't think you necessarily like this, but it's a little gift from me. Lan Yu went to cook. Qin Chen and Blue Mother got along in private. She looked at the bracelet in her hand. It was of excellent quality. It was a good thing at first sight. She smiled, I like it very much. With that, she put it on her hand. This move, in fact, is not flattering, very natural, but Blue Mother is happy. The more she looks at it, the more she likes it. In addition to the change of Qin Chen, there is another point. Huang Xia, who she looked for last time, is so crazy. She heard from Lan Yu's father that she even drove to hit Qin Chen and Lan Yu. Then she pretended to save them. She didn't know that she put one of her legs on it. This is called evil people have evil retribution. Blue Mother didn't expect that the person she had seen all her life had made a mistake and liked such a madman. If Lan Yu married her, would he still have a peaceful life? Qin Chen was the best. He was calm and rational. Qin Chen turns on the TV to let the Blue Mother watch, and he takes a magazine to accompany her. There is no extra words, but it is warm. If in the past, Blue Mother must feel that she has been neglected, but now she is not sure about Qin Chen's temperament. Knowing that this is the highest level of treatment, she is also satisfied. However, while she was satisfied, she was secretly cursing herself for being so cheap. Blue Mother's psychological activities are particularly rich. Qin Chen looked over, Auntie, do you need anything else? No, very good. Blue Mother quickly said. Qin Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. She was about to look down at the magazine, but Blue Mother couldn't help but ask, Qin Chen, when are you and Lan Yu going to get married? You are still young, but Lan Yu is not young. He should have been a father for a long time when he was in his early 30s. Qin Chen blinked, didn't he become a father long ago? Isn't Ishu his son? Her son's dark past was dug up, and as a mother, Mother Lawn didn't look good either. Her face darkened for a long time before she said, "That's your older brother's child." Chin, it's not like you don't know. Lan Yu and Shui sleep in separate beds. This was his explanation, but he was cursing Lan Yu in his heart. What was he thinking back then? How could he raise someone else's wife and raise someone else's child as his own? And the child's mother didn't even know. Chapter 2869. Blue Mother didn't know that this was actually Qin Chen's skin. Qin Chen looked at Blue Mother's appearance, didn't say anything, and went to read the magazine again. Blue Mother was so excited just now that she didn't respond. She was also quite lost. She looked at it for a long time. Lan Yu stood at the door with a fruit plate, looked at them getting along, smiled and walked over. Putting down the fruit plate, he looked at his mother. "Mom, you haven't tasted Chinchin's poisonous tongue." Blue Mother gave her son a white look. "Of course I haven't tasted it, I don't kiss her." After that, Blue Mother was very proud. After Lan Yu was stunned, he smiled. Qin Chen was a little annoyed and stared at him. Lan Yu ignored her, but looked at his mother. "Chen and I will get married soon. As for the date, you can go back and discuss it with Dad, and then look at the yellow calendar. It's okay within a month." "A month?" Blue Mother opened her mouth. "I'm afraid it won't work. It will take 3 months in a hurry." Lan Yu's fingers stroked Qin Chen's abdomen. "What if there is?" Blue Mother was stunned again. "Yes." Qin Chen slapped his hand away. "Don't talk nonsense. There's no such thing." Lan Yu leaned over and whispered, "There's no need to take measures from tonight. There will be soon. Do you think you can wait for 3 months? Qin Chen gave him a white look, and then felt a little uncomfortable. Is she here now to discuss marriage with them? She doesn't seem to have agreed to marry him yet. Lan Yu smiled and held her hand. "Don't go back on your word. Chen, I want to get married." Qin Chen bit his lip. Blue Mother coughed softly. "I'll go to the bathroom. Tell me when you think about it." Then she said discontentedly, "Young people nowadays don't discuss such a big thing as marriage with their parents." Blue Mother's tone is quite lost. The Blue family hasn't had a happy event for a long time. She hopes to have a lively scene. She doesn't want to aggrieve her son or Qin Chen. Besides, wouldn't it take a few months for the hair to grow out? If the son married a man at the wedding, would the scene still look good? Mother Lan thought about it and was worried, so she turned around and asked, "Chen, are you going to wear a wedding dress?" Just as she asked, she saw her son and the girl kissing. Blue Mother's old face is red. These damn children really can't wait a moment longer. Blue Mother still left quietly, went back to discuss with her wife about the marriage, and also wanted to go to the Qin family to propose marriage another day. Both sides were respectable families, so they couldn't be careless about this matter. Otherwise, people would say that the Lan family didn't understand etiquette. Blue Mother left and was found half an hour later. Qin Chen left Lan Yu's lips and said in a low voice, "Did your mom eat something bad? She hasn't come out yet." Lan Yu held her face and continued to kiss her as he murmured, "Then we'll discuss it after she comes out of the bathroom. Before that, don't talk and let me kiss you properly." Qin Chen is speechless. Isn't he tired of kissing? It turns out that men are never tired of doing these things. As a result, after kissing for 2 hours, he found that his mother had left, and he carried her back upstairs directly. When everything calmed down, Qin Chen lay in his sweaty arms and poked his heart. "I think we should move to live with your parents after we get married. Otherwise, I'll die of exhaustion if this continues for a long time." Chapter 2870. Qin Chen chuckled and didn't say anything. She just rested in his arms. Everything had become so beautiful. She became more and more beautiful day by day, as if she was a different person. Chen didn't go to work at the hospital anymore. She focused on learning how to arrange flowers and how to make tea at home because she had promised Lanyu that she would quit drinking coffee. He was so overbearing. He told her to open a cafe but didn't allow her to drink coffee at the same time. But thinking about it, she seemed to be drinking less recently. She often boiled coffee and threw it away. Chen put a rose in the vase and stuck out his tongue. Fortunately, his family was rich enough to be able to afford to lose. She had a lot of shares in King Entertainment and didn't have to worry about her life. But Lanyu gave her a black gold card for her daily expenses. He said that he was supporting her and that she could spend it however she wanted. Chen had seen it before. The amount was enough to open 50 high-end cafes. She was flattered but accepted it calmly. She had to serve Mr. Lan happily at night. This kind of life was very slow. She woke up naturally in the morning and had breakfast ready. He had left at 8, but he waited until she woke up to give her a good morning kiss and eat breakfast with her before going to work. Of course, she also knew that he went jogging early in the morning. Thinking of this, Chen's face turned slightly red. He was a man who didn't sleep for more than a few hours a night and exercised the entire night. How could he have the strength to jog early in the morning after exhausting so much energy? Although she had doubts, she didn't dare to ask. She would only be asking for trouble. Chen smiled and remembered that they had an appointment to take wedding photos at 5 o'clock today. Recently, he had been quite busy, so he only took indoor photos. As for the outdoor photos, he would take them for her during their honeymoon. Chen tidied up the vase and let out a long sigh. She liked her current life. It had only been a few days and she had even forgotten that she was a doctor. She smelled the roses. The fragrance of flowers smelled good, much better than the smell of disinfectant in the hospital. Just as she was about to make some simple dishes, her phone rang. She picked it up. Lanyu. The person on the other side was silent for a long time. Chen was a little surprised. He looked at the caller ID. It was an unknown number. Just as she was about to hang up, a voice came from the other side. Chen, it's me. Chen's heart sank. Naturally, she would not forget this voice. It was Rollercoasters. She silently calculated in her heart. Today was the last day that Rollercoasters would stay in B City. He had to leave tomorrow. Thinking of this, she relaxed slightly. What's the matter? Rollercoasters' voice was gentle. Chen, I want to see you one last time. Chen was silent for a while before he sighed. Rollercoasters, there's no need for that, is there? Did you not see me for the last time? Rollercoasters' voice was low and hoarse. Chen, you must hate me very much. No. Chen thought for a moment and said, Rollercoasters, it's just that so much time has passed. We are no longer the same as before. Rollercoasters smiled very softly. I've always been like this. Chen, you know very well that it's only you who has changed. His voice was slow. It's just that you fell in love with someone else. That's all. Chen was a little sad. She did not want to become such a hostile relationship with Rollercoasters, but it seemed that he had gone to the extreme. In the end, they still became strangers. Chapter 2871. She didn't deny it, because she did like Lanyu. A real-life Lanyu. And Rollercoasters, she murmured, Rollercoasters, you are suitable to be admired, and what I need is a life. If Rollercoasters appeared again, he was not the person who was high and mighty, and he was still like when he was 20 years old, her choice might not be like this. Her voice became softer. If I say I'm sorry can make you feel better, then I'm sorry. Ronglai's voice became cold and hard. Do you really love him so much? Are you willing to exchange everything for him? Qin Chen lowered his eyes. Yes. On the other side, Ronglai didn't speak again, just breathing lightly. Just like when they called each other when they were young, when they were angry, they didn't talk or hang up the phone, just breathing lightly. After a long time, Qin Chen said in a low voice, if there's nothing else, I'll hang up first. Ronglai, have a safe journey. This was the last blessing. After she hung up the phone, she was stunned for a long time, and also looked at the phone for fear that it would ring again. About a minute later, the phone really rang. She was a little scared and stared at it. However, this time it was Lan Yu who called. She looked at the familiar number and was relieved, and her tone softened. Lan Yu. Have you had lunch? Lan Yu sat on the swivel chair in the office, holding the phone in one hand and unbuttoning the second button of his shirt with the other. There was an indescribable joy in his expression. Qin Chen infected his mood. Not yet. I'm going to do it. He thought for a moment. Do you need me to come back to accompany you? She smiled. No, I'm not so clingy. But I like to be clingy. He murmured in a low voice, also with a hint, there's a meeting at 2:00 in the afternoon, and it's about 3 hours at noon. Don't you think it's a waste of 3 hours, Mrs. Lan? Qin Chen snorted softly. You can use these 3 hours to think about how to earn more money to satisfy me. Lan Yu rubbed his forehead and said with surprise, I haven't satisfied Mrs. Lan yet. Looks like I'll have to work harder tonight. Qin Chen couldn't take it anymore and hung up the phone. However, her face was still a little hot. She placed the vase at the head of the bed, admired it for a while, and then went to prepare some food. She knew a little about some simple dishes. At 3:00 in the afternoon, she wanted to go out and buy some skincare products. She didn't use these before, but now she wanted to take care of her skin. Especially since Lan Yu seemed to have a preference for soft skin. As his wife, she had to fulfill this small wish of his. Qin Chen had changed into a shirt-style dress. It was not considered soft and beautiful, but it was long enough to her knees, revealing a straight and slender calf. Her skin was very white and fine, so clear that almost no pores could be seen. Her hair was slightly longer, and she looked very feminine. No one would mistake her for a man again. There was no doubt that she was also beautiful. She put on her sunglasses, drove a white Bentley out, and walked into the shopping mall next to the wedding dress studio. Originally, she wanted to find Cher, but thinking about her elder brother, she just thought about it and gave up. And Qin Mu. Forget it, Chun Mu was pregnant now, and it was not convenient. Qin Chen shopped alone. She was not a hesitant person, so she bought what she wanted to buy in half an hour. She raised her hand and saw that it was still early, so she called Lan Yu again. He said that he might be a little late for a meeting. Chapter 2872. Qin Chen looked up and was stunned. It was Ronglai. Looking at her dazed eyes, Ronglai smiled and said, You refused to see me, so I could only come to see you. His eyes were burning as he looked at her face and her body. She had become very beautiful. She was no longer the cold and noble Dr. Qin, but a beautiful woman. Did Lan Yu change her, or did she change for Lan Yu? No matter which one it was, it made Ronglai very uncomfortable. When he looked at her, Qin Chen narrowed her eyes slightly and looked at him defensively. What do you want? Ronglai smiled faintly. He looked at Qin Chen and said, Chen Chen, when did our relationship become so hostile? At this time, the waiter brought the milk over. Miss, your coffee. After putting it down, he deliberately looked at Qin Chen a few more times. Qin Chen took a sip of milk, looked up again and said softly, Ronglei, you could have lived in my beautiful memory for the rest of my life. You said that I hate you very much. Yes, in a sense, I should hate you. She smiled bitterly. Since you're wrong, isn't it better to be wrong to the end? It's not fair for you to treat me like this. What about me? Ronglei's voice was a little tense. Is it fair for you to treat me like this? I still love you, and you love someone else. Qin Chen's eyes were a little hot. She looked at the man in front of her. Really, this man used to be everything in her dreams. For so many years, she loved him so much, but now he said that he loved her. She smiled softly. You said that you love me. Why don't I feel anything? Ronglei held her hand. Come with me. Qin Chen, you will remember your love for me. Qin Chen raised his eyes and looked at him. Their eyes met. She slowly withdrew her hand and drank a glass of milk. She said, Ronglei, this milk is warm. It's like the feeling I get from living life. It's also like the feeling I get from Lan Yu. I don't know if I love him, but I want to live with him. I want to get married, have children, and live the most ordinary life. Ronglei tightens his thin lips and lowers his voice. But you are Qin Chen. You are destined to be extraordinary. Maybe, but that was in the past. Qin Chen smiled. Ronglei, no matter why you came back to find me, I wish you happiness in the future. As she spoke, she gently sipped the glass of milk and slowly got up. Don't look for me anymore. It's impossible between us. After a few steps, his tense voice came from behind. Qin Chen, do you think you can escape? Unless you don't care about the team in New York, don't care about Lan Yu's life or death. Qin Chen's body froze. Ronglei slowly approached her and his body sticks to her back. You should know why I came to find you. Qin Chen, only you and I can reverse this world. You know too well that as long as I want, Lan Yu will return to his vegetative state 2 years ago. At that time, you weren't there. Will he always be in a vegetative state? When her body stiffens, he chuckles. Are you sure you want to marry him? Qin Chen, you love him. Are you going to harm him? What do you want? Qin Chen's voice is a little depressed. Ronglei's slender fingers caress her earlobe. His voice is charming. You know, I want you to come back to me. Chapter 2873. That's impossible. Qin Chen slowly turned her head. She looked at Ronglei and slapped him. He didn't dodge, nor did he fight back. He looked at her as if he was looking at an unreasonable child. But only they knew who was making a fuss. Qin Chen said word by word, Ronglei, if you dare to hurt him, I guarantee that you will die a terrible death. Her tone became more and more determined. Even if the whole world is buried with me, I won't let you go. Ronglei didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled. He has finally become your weakness, hasn't he, Qin Chen? There was a hint of madness in his eyes. It's good that you fall in love with him. At least you will leave with me obediently. In your dreams. Qin Chen raised her chin slightly. And Ronglei saw a hint of killing intent in her eyes. There was also a hint of coldness in his eyes. She actually wanted to kill him for Lan Yu. Was that man that important to her? Ronglei chuckled. You will take the initiative to find me. Qin Chen, I'll wait for you in France, he said as he leaned over and kissed her cheek. Qin Chen's heart was pounding violently. She gritted her teeth. I will kill you. You can try. He smiled. His smile was very beautiful, like the most handsome demon. Qin Chen narrowed her eyes. If they weren't outside, she might have gotten rid of Ronglei directly. Perhaps she would feel uneasy for the rest of her life, but if it could be exchanged for Lan Yu's safety, she felt that it was worth it. Ronglei stared into her eyes, chuckling softly as he walked away, step by step. Qin Chen stood where she was, her eyes a little dazed. At the same time, Ronglei tapped on his phone a few times, and Lan Yu received a few wonderful photos. There was a photo of Qin Chen and Ronglei looking at each other. A photo of Ronglei holding Qin Chen's hand. The angle of the capture was very good, and the look in his eyes was deep. Lan Yu stood at the top of the office and watched silently for a long time before calling Qin Chen. Qin Chen's phone rang many times before he picked it up. His voice was still a little hoarse. Lan Yu, are you here? We can leave soon. Chen Chen, are you still at home? Do you need me to pick you up? His tone carried a slight smile. But there was no trace of a smile on his face. Qin Chen was a little absent-minded. After a long time, he finally said, "No, I'm outside. I bought some skincare products. Now in the cafe." "No, I'm alone. One person." Lan Yu slowly put down his phone. He looked outside. He knew that the photos were sent by Ronglei, and he also knew that he shouldn't be calculative about the relationship between Qin Chen and Ronglei, but he was still a little unaccustomed to it. After all, she had been another person's shadow for 12 years. That kind of feeling. How could he compare? Sometimes when he woke up at night and hugged her, he felt a little unreal. Did she really choose him and give up Ronglei? But he had never asked. She agreed to get married, so their marriage took its course. Lan Yu stood by the window and smoked a few cigarettes. Then he took his coat and went out. He didn't want her to wait, and he didn't want to think too much. He didn't want to be tricked by Ronglei. Tomorrow, he would let someone watch Ronglei leave this land. Lan Yu got into the car, and his face was a little solemn. And Qin Chen had been waiting for him. When he arrived, Qin Chen had already changed into her wedding dress. She stood there as beautiful as a painting. Chapter 2874. Qin Chen smiled faintly and returned a kiss on his cheek. Then, she looked at herself in the mirror with him. "Do I look good?" He grunted, "Very beautiful." Qin Chen reached out to touch his handsome face and said in a low voice, "Lan Yu, go change." He smiled, patted her hand, and quickly went to change into a new set of clothes. When he came out, Qin Chen was already done with her makeup. It was a fresh look, but it was stunning enough. He had always known that she was beautiful, but he had never thought that she could be this beautiful. Lan Yu stood there and walked over slowly. He held her hand and kissed it. "Chen Chen, you're so beautiful." The photographer was also a little excited. He had already prepared to complete the perfect work tonight. Just thinking about it made him excited. Qin Chen and Lan Yu stood together. Her head was resting on Lan Yu's shoulder. She smiled naturally. This was probably what it was like to be married to love. The photographer asked them to change a few sets of actions, and the shoot went smoothly. It was completed in about an hour. He looked at the photo and smiled. It almost doesn't need to be fixed. It's perfect. Qin Chen and Lan Yu looked at each other and smiled. They went back to the changing room to change. When they went out, it wasn't too late yet. Qin Chen said that she wanted to eat skewers. She said that she hadn't eaten in B City yet. Lan Yu carried his coat and put one hand on her shoulder. "You really want to eat?" Qin Chen nodded. "I want to eat." Lan Yu smiled. Walk from here to the street ahead. There are a few good barbecue shops. I'll take you there. He reached out to pinch her nose and smiled dotingly. When he turned around, his face was a little gloomy. Qin Chen saw it and asked absent-mindedly, "Lan Yu, what's wrong?" Lan Yu shook his head and smiled. "Nothing, I'm just a little tired." He squeezed her hand suggestively. Qin Chen stuck his tongue out at him and ran in front of him. At this moment, she was completely different from her previous self. Instead, she was a girl immersed in love. She turned to look at him. "Lan Yu, are you too tired to run?" Lan Yu looked around. Many people were already looking at her. On one hand, it was because of her beauty. On the other hand, it was because her words were too ambiguous. He smiled, took a few quick steps, and held her in his arms. "Don't run too fast, Qin Chen." He lowered his voice. "I'm afraid I won't be able to catch up." Qin Chen looked at him and curled up the corners of his mouth. He looked very happy. Lan Yu couldn't help but ask, "Qin Chen, is this the life you want?" She thought for a moment. "I want another child." Her expression was relaxed like never before. She looked at him and smiled. "Lan Yu, let's have a child after we get married." "I want to have a child. It should be very fulfilling to bring him up." Lan Yu stopped walking. He reached out and hugged her waist. He said in a low voice, "Let's wait for 2 more years. You're still young." Qin Chen looked down at herself. "Are you talking about my Xiongxiao?" He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "It's age." His voice became a little emotional. "Qin Chen, you're only 24 years old. I also want to play for 2 more years." Her face turned red. "What do you mean by play?" She wouldn't let him play. She walked in front with a red face. Lan Yu followed behind unhurriedly. It was her angry look, but it was also the look of love. Lan Yu held his forehead with his palm. What else did he have to worry about? She clearly looked like she was in love. Qin Chen wasn't a person who would compromise. She was very straightforward. If she said she liked him, she really liked him. He no longer had any doubts. Lan Yu deleted those photos as he walked. He no longer had any doubts. He caught up with her and held her hand. Chapter 2875. Qin Chen glanced at him. "Are you going to apologize to me?" "If you mean that I'm going to play for 2 years, then I probably won't say it." He smiled and kissed her face. Qin Chen complained, "Shameless. Didn't you say that you want a child?" Lan Yu lit a cigarette with one hand and took a puff. "How can I want a child if I want to be shameless?" Qin Chen couldn't stand it anymore. Fortunately, they arrived at the barbecue restaurant and he took her in. Qin Chen had never been to a place like this before. Everything was ordered by Lan Yu. When they got in, Qin Chen's expression was very cute in his eyes. She had always been a big eater, so he ordered 5 servings for the 2 of them. Even so, Qin Chen still finished it very quickly. Lan Yu drank 2 glasses of beer and frowned. "It's almost done. If I eat too much, I'll have a stomachache." Qin Chen begged for a long time before he ordered a few more dishes. After eating this time, she didn't make a scene again. Instead, they walked on the street to digest the food. Qin Chen raised their hands and smiled. "Lan Yu, don't you think we look like an old married couple?" Lan Yu looked at her and said slowly, "You look like me in bed, but not outside." She glared at him and he smiled. "Let's go. I'll take you to the movies." He looked at her sideways and said, but he pulled her into his arms and kissed her gently. After a long time, he gently left her lips and pressed his forehead against hers. He whispered, "Chen Chen, I'm not dreaming, right? We're really together, aren't we?" Chen Chen's eyes shimmered. Her answer to him was to raise her arm and touch her red lips. The night wind blew away the smell of alcohol and replaced it with his strong manly scent. Chen Chen looked down and smiled when he looked at him again. "I'll call you brother from now on, okay?" "Why?" There was a hint of a smile in his long and narrow eyes. Chen Chen took his hand and walked forward. His voice was a little soft. "Think about it. You're so much older than me, or do you want me to call you uncle?" Lan Yu patted her on the back. "Naughty. You don't like it?" Chen Chen tilted her head to look at him. Her eyes were like countless little stars, beautiful and dazzling. Lan Yu stepped forward and covered her eyes with his hand. His voice was a little hoarse. "Chen Chen." She nodded and turned to look at him. "Brother." Lan Yu held her in his arms and sighed slightly. "It's okay. I just wanted to wake you up." She struggled a little, but in return, he hugged her even more tightly. He kissed her hair and murmured, "So there is more happiness than happiness." Chen Chen smiled and stayed in his arms. "How many children are we going to have in the future?" Lan Yu pulled her shoulders and looked at her. "Children are more important than me. Can they satisfy you more than me?" Chen Chen bit her lips. "Shameless." Lan Yu held her hand and walked forward. There was a gentle smile on his handsome face. This was one of the rare times when he and Chen Chen were not in bed, but he still felt very satisfied. It was actually not bad to be an old married couple. When they arrived at the cinema on the 4th floor of the square, Chen Chen wanted to watch a romance film, but Mr. Lan chose a horror film. He thought that Chen Chen would curl up in his arms and scream, but the film was about a murderer dissecting a human body. The scene made Lan Yu very uncomfortable. Chen Chen was holding the popcorn and watching it in a daze. When they left the cinema, Lan Yu hugged the trash can and threw up. Chapter 2876. Lan Yu vomited again. His face turned green from all the vomiting. He looked at Chen Chen with a touch of sadness in his eyes. Chen Chen smiled and handed him the water. Lan Yu took it and cleaned himself up. When he straightened up, his face was still a little pale. Chen Chen looked at him. "Do you want me to carry you?" "No, you can drive later." He closed his eyes and pulled her into his arms. She didn't struggle but complained in a low voice, "Lan Yu, you smell so bad." He smiled and suddenly buried his face in her neck. "Chen Chen, have you ever been afraid?" She didn't understand, so she said softly. Lan Yu let out a deep breath. "When facing those limbs and opening their internal organs, have you ever been afraid?" He added, "It's really disgusting." Chen Chen thought for a moment and said slowly, "I have been afraid and disgusted. After the first operation, I didn't eat for 3 days. I was so hungry that my blood sugar was too low. There was nothing I could do. I would vomit if I ate. Then I gradually got used to it." She smiled. "It's a process." Then she looked at Lan Yu. "What about you? Did you blush when you drew a woman for the first time?" Mr. Lan wouldn't answer this question directly. Smart men would avoid it, and he was no exception. Chen Chen didn't get an answer for a long time. She reached out and poked his heart. "I'm asking you. Did you have a physiological reaction, huh?" Lan Yu smiled and rubbed her short hair. "I don't remember the past, but I did when I drew for you last time." Shameless. She blushed and walked forward. He took a step forward and held her hand. Are you shy? No. She made a face. And Lan Yu was a little lost for a moment. Qin Chen took a few steps back and saw that he was still in the same place. She couldn't help but ask, Lan Yu. Lan Yu smiled faintly. His expression was particularly gentle in the dark. He said slowly, Chen Chen, you're very good. Qin Chen pursed his lips, chuckled and ran over to hug him. She thought that this was what happiness looked like. On the way back, she was the one driving, and Lan Yu sat beside her with his eyes closed. She thought that he must be exhausted after working for a whole day and spending so much time with her at night, so she didn't wake him up and let him rest. However, men were all immoral. She knew when she got out of the car. The man who had been resting suddenly opened his eyes. We've arrived. Qin Chen nodded and got out of the car. Take a shower and go to bed early. He had been very busy these days, and even their sex life had been a lot less. Qin Chen was dispensable, mainly because when he was energetic, she would be very tired. However, as soon as she finished speaking, her hand was caught and the man took her upstairs. Let's bathe together. Qin Chen coughed lightly. Can I refuse? Lan Yu picked her up. You want to refuse? She smiled and hugged his neck. I'm afraid you'll be too tired. In a while, you can see if I'm tired. He kissed her lips, his voice low. A few minutes later, in the bathroom. Qin Chen looked at him, bit his lip, and refused in a low voice, Can you brush your teeth? Lan Yu was stunned for a moment, then angrily went to brush his teeth. 10 minutes later, he grabbed her and kissed her. Being kissed by him, Qin Chen suddenly thought of something. Her period hadn't come for a long time. Chapter 2877. Qin Chen was stunned. Lan Yu kissed her lips. What's wrong? She looked at him in a daze and smiled faintly. Oh, it's nothing. She put her arms around his neck, and there was a trace of panic in her eyes. But soon, she didn't have time to panic. He pressed her against the bathroom wall and kissed her. Lan Yu kissed her deeply and murmured, Chen Chen. Qin Chen put her arms around his neck and buried herself in his arms. Her voice trembled a little. Lan Yu, I'm very happy. She tilted her head back and looked at him. She had been alone for so long and so lonely. Now she knew that life could be so perfect. She lay in his arms, smiling, and tears flashed. Now she knew that he wasn't perfect, but she liked him like this. It turned out that the little things they had together were happiness and love. But she had once pushed everything away with her own hands. Lan Yu, why didn't you give up on me? With a touch of passion in her eyes, she put her hand on his shoulder and asked seriously. Lan Yu thought about it seriously, kissed her, and murmured, I thought about it, so that time with Lin Cece. Before he finished speaking, Qin Chen bit his lips. That's why you rolled into bed with Lin Cece, isn't it? Lan Yu chuckled. I didn't do anything to her. He whispered in her ear, you didn't even get up that time. Qin Chen blushed and looked away. I don't believe it. You don't believe it. His smile deepened, and his body pressed against hers. Tell me, with you, how can I be interested in other women, huh? Qin Chen bit her lip and stared at him. But at this moment, he deliberately took advantage of her. She let out a muffled groan and instinctively tried to struggle, but he still succeeded. Because of what he said just now, he was a little naughty tonight. From the bathroom to the bed in the bedroom, he tortured her for a long time, and then he became a little rough. Qin Chen remembered that she didn't have her period, so she pushed his shoulder. It hurts a little. Be gentle. Lan Yu was stunned. Although his body was hot, he still stopped nervously and checked her. What's wrong? Am I too heavy, huh? Chen couldn't listen to it anymore. She held his shoulder. Don't say it. Lan Yu kissed her face. Then I'll end it, huh? He pressed her down and only dared to finish. When everything calmed down, his whole body was covered in hot sweat. He took a deep breath and helped her clean up. He wasn't a particularly gentle person in bed, but he was very considerate after. He made her feel loved, and it wasn't just a simple love between a man and a woman. Chen lay on his side, feeling his attentive care. After he finished, Lan Yu leaned over and asked in a low voice, "Does it still hurt? Do you want to buy some medicine?" She shook her head, pulled him down, and hugged him gently. She murmured, "I just want to hug you now." He looked at her. At this moment, Chen had a fragile beauty. He smiled and said, "Our Chen seems to have become smaller." Thinking about the past, especially when he woke up for the first time after the car accident, he was such a beautiful and sharp-tongued male doctor. But now, she was so soft in his arms, lying in his bed. It was incredible. Lan Yu lay on his side and held her in his arms. She was very tall, over 170, but he was 184, so she still looked petite in his arms. Chapter 2878. Such a night was peaceful and beautiful. Lan Yu, will we be happy like this for the rest of our lives? Her voice was very low, and she rested her head on his shoulder. For the rest of our lives. With that, she raised her head. When I'm old, will you think that a young girl is better? Lan Yu pressed her little head in his arms, and his face was very gentle. I'm so much older than you. When you're old, I'll be old. He didn't say anything nice, because there was no need. Time would prove everything. Chen didn't speak anymore, lying in his arms and looking at the dark night outside. In her heart, there was a touch of uneasiness, and she gently put her fingers on her lower abdomen. The next day, after Lan Yu went to work, Chen got up. He prepared breakfast for her, and she quietly finished it. The phone on the table rang, and the number was strange yet familiar. She recognized that it was Rollercoasters' phone. Chen pursed her lips and reached out to pick it up. After a moment of silence, Rollercoasters said in a low voice, Chen, I'm leaving. Okay. Chen nodded, and then she didn't know what to say. She and Rollercoasters seemed to have nothing to say. Love or not, it seemed to be a matter of a moment. Rollercoasters' voice became a little hoarse. I didn't expect that when I came back, it would be like this. Chen, I always thought that you would love me forever. After a while, Chen said softly, I'm sorry. Rollercoasters said goodbye and hung up. Chen looked at the phone for a long time, and then hung up. After a long time, she took the car key and went out. She didn't go to Xingyuan, but chose a private hospital. When she picked up the pregnancy test, she froze. She was pregnant. She was sure that the child was Lan Yu's, because she had no other man except him. However, she really didn't know when it happened, because they all took precautions. There was only one time when she took the morning after pill. Chen looked at it for a long time before he took out his phone and dialed Lan Yu's number. But no one picked up his phone. She then remembered that he had a meeting this morning. He walked out and got into the car. Just as he was about to start the engine, something cold pressed against the back of his head. Startled, she realized that it was a gun. A soft voice came from behind him, Chen, give me the things in the bag. It was Rollercoasters' voice. Chen's body stiffened. She clenched her fists. Rollercoasters. I think I forgot something, so I didn't get on the plane. Rollercoasters' voice was a little light. Chen Chen, be good and give me the thing. Qin Chen took a deep breath. If I don't give it to you, will you kill me? Rong Lei put away the gun and said calmly, yes, I can't bear to kill you. But I think I can bear to kill Lan Yu's mother and Lin Cece. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Chen's body stiffened. Be good, I'll count to 3. If you don't give me the thing, you can start with Lin Cece, Rong Lei said calmly. Qin Chen closed his eyes and handed him the test report from his bag. Rong Lei took it. In just a second, his expression changed completely. She was pregnant with Lan Yu's child. The muscles on his face were trembling. He was no longer as arrogant and indifferent as usual. The girl that he loved so much, who was so pure, had a child with another man. Rong Lei chuckled, and there was a hint of desolation in his laughter. Chapter 2879. Drive the car to the airport. Rong Lei's voice was very deep. Qin Chen's fingers held the steering wheel and didn't move for a long time. He seemed to be impatient and narrowed his eyes. Chen Chen, you should know my character. No, I don't know you. Qin Chen closed her eyes. Rong Lei, maybe I never knew you. Her voice became soft. When I was young, what I liked was just an illusion, not the real you. She didn't like him and didn't love him anymore, but she was still sad that he had become like this. All these years of love were just a lie. Rong Lei's face was as dark as water. Then, I don't mind letting you really know me once. After that, he held the phone. Cut off one of Lin Cece's fingers. Qin Chen's body was completely stiff. Before she could speak, there was a tragic cry from the other side of the phone. Her face froze. She could tell that it was Lin Cece's voice. Rong Lei. Qin Chen's voice was trembling. You're so cruel. Yes. His voice was very calm. Cruelty is my true face. Chen Chen, all these years of pain have long worn away the softness in my heart, and the only kindness I have is you, but you're so disobedient. Qin Chen closed her eyes. What do you want? Drive to the airport and go back to France with me. His tone was calm. Qin Chen clenched her fingers. I thought you would want to go back to New York. After we get married, I will take you there, he said very indifferently. Qin Chen opened her eyes and looked ahead. What if I don't? I don't care about their lives. You know I've always been very selfish. Lan Yu laughed softly. But I know that you care about Lan Yu's mother. Think about it. If she dies, can you be with Lan Yu at ease? Qin Chen didn't say anything, but his fingers tightened on the steering wheel. I'll give you 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, Lan Yu's mother's finger will be broken. Rong Lei calmly counted. Qin Chen's forehead was covered in sweat, and his whole body was covered in sweat. She knew that once she boarded the plane to France, there was no turning back. She and Lan Yu were finished. She knew Rong Lei's methods too well. But at this moment, she had no choice. Rong Lei suddenly chuckled. Do you know why the old lady fell into my hands? Qin Chen's heart skipped a beat. Because I asked someone to call her and say that something happened to you. That's why the old lady rushed over and didn't bring the bodyguard that Lan Yu gave her. Rong Lei's voice had a touch of evil. Qin Chen closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she didn't say anything but started the car. She lost. She lost completely. Rong Lei knew her so well that he knew all her weaknesses. And Rong Lei in the back seat smiled with satisfaction. It's just that he felt sad about this kind of satisfaction. Because he had lost Qin Chen. He had lost his entire life. Chen drove so fast that Ronglei almost thought that she wanted to die with him, but he knew that she wouldn't, because she had something to worry about. An hour later, the white Bentley stopped at the airport. Chen got out of the car immediately, and Ronglei confiscated her mobile phone. On the luxurious plane, Blue Mother and Lin Cece were tied to the seat. Lin Cece's hands were covered with blood, which was still dripping. There was a small cut finger on the white carpet. Chapter 2880. This is the first time she has been so close to Lin Cece. She used to think that this girl was very willful, but now she is very pitiful. If she hadn't been involved in her and Ronglei, Lin Cece would probably still be the willful princess. Let me operate on her, she whispered. Lin Cece shook her head, her face full of sweat. It's no use. Chen, why did you come? It's clear that happiness is at hand, so she doesn't need to care, and Lan Yu's mother used to hate her so much. Why did Chen come? She can be happy. Lin Cece cried, tears and sweat dripping down together. She almost cried. I don't want you to care, you go. Ronglei is so abnormal, Chen comes, and Lan Yu is almost impossible. As she said, she struggled hard, regardless of the injury on her hand. Blue Mother on one side is also crying. I heard you, Chen. I am useless, I am fooled by them. Chen smiled lightly. No, he wants me to go with him, I can't escape. Not Blue Mother, that person will also be Lan Yu. She never forgot what Ronglei said to her last night. She would rather be Blue Mother than Lan Yu. She whispered, let her go and wash away her memory. I'll go to France with you. Blue Mother's eyes widened. Chen squatted down slowly. She held Blue Mother's hand and said softly, because I love Lan Yu, so. I want him to be well. Perhaps she should never look back. She knows the danger and Ronglei's ambition. She turned back and hurt Lan Yu and the people around him. Now it's Blue Mother, and later it may be Lan Yu, or the Qin family and the Tang family. She has no choice. I really love him, Chen said, with tears in her eyes. She took out a small thing from her pocket and shook it in front of Blue Mother. Blue Mother's eyes are a little straight. She wants to struggle. She wants to remember something important, but this memory is still washed away. A few minutes later, Chen whispered, send her back, her memory is washed away. Lin Cece bit her teeth. I don't want to, Chen, you don't want to do this to me. Ronglei motioned people to send Blue Mother away. When she woke up, she would forget all this. Chen said in a low voice, I want her alive, otherwise I won't do anything for you. Of course. Ronglei smiled. Chen looked at Lin Cece and said, Chen. Lin Cece nodded, her eyes were filled with determination. Chen smiled and looked at her, but his words were directed at Ronglei. I want someone to accompany me. Ronglei agreed. Chen lowered his eyes and reached out to rub Lin Cece's sweaty hair. Does it hurt? Lin Cece shook her head, then nodded again. Chen closed his eyes, slowly turned around, and took his cell phone from Ronglei's hand. She dialed Lan Yu's number. This time, Lan Yu answered. Chen paused for a moment and said slowly, I'm sorry, I love Ronglei. She hung up her cell phone after that, and her heart was numb. She took out the SIM card and threw it out. It seems that she threw away the connection between her and Lan Yu. At that moment, her face was as pale as paper. She had stolen this relationship from him, and now it was time to return it. Lan Yu, I'm sorry. if there is a next life, I will find you when I was 12 years old, and I will always love you. Even if you don't want me, even if you don't love me and ignore me, I will always be with you. Lan Yu, goodbye, because I miss you all. Qin Chen looked at Rong Lei and said, are you satisfied now? Rong Lei frowned and said, Qin Chen, you will forget him and fall in love with me again. You will return to the world we used to live in. That is the world that belongs to us. You are just lost. She smiled and said, it doesn't matter. She leaned on his shoulder and looked at Anna behind him. She turned her face slightly and looked up at him. Was it Anna who chopped off one of Lin Cece's fingers? Rong Lei did not speak. Qin Chen smiled and said, it seems that you haven't given me an engagement ring yet. Hearing her words, Rong Lei relaxed and said, let's pick one together when we go back to France, okay? Qin Chen put her face on his shoulder again and smiled, but I want the one in her hand. Rong Lei looked at Anna and saw that Anna's face was ashen. Rong Lei smiled and said, take it if you want. Anna won't mind. Qin Chen smiled sweetly and said, I'm afraid that you will mind. After saying that, she took the gun and pointed it at Anna's arm. Anna's body trembled and she stepped back with a pale face. With a bang, she was shot in the arm. Qin Chen's voice was cold and inhuman. The aorta is damaged. Even if you survive, this arm will be useless. Anna's body hit the cabin door behind her and blood kept flowing down. Rong Lei didn't even blink. He raised his hand and asked someone to carry Anna away. Then he looked at Qin Chen and said, as long as you are happy. Yes, I am happy. Qin Chen returned the gun to him. For a moment, she wanted to kill him, but she didn't want to die. Even if there was a glimmer of hope, she wanted to come back alive, even if there was a glimmer of hope. Chapter 2881. In the city, Lan Yu's expression slowly turned cold as he held his phone. His phone slid down slowly, and in the end, he clenched it tightly. His mind was filled with what she had said. She had said that the person she loved was Rong Lei. How could this be? Impossible. These days, she changed into women's clothes for him, grew her hair long, and became so soft for him. But she said that she still loved Rong Lei. He didn't believe it. Lan Yu walked out. When he reached the secretary's office, he said coldly, prepare my private plane to France. The little secretary was stunned for a moment, then immediately picked up the phone to call. When Lan Yu arrived at the airport, his phone rang. He picked it up, and then his gaze darkened. His mother fainted and was taken to the hospital. Lan Yu's car stopped. He looked up at the sky and watched the planes take off. His eyes were filled with pain. His fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly. His father's voice came from the other side. Lan Yu, I'm afraid your mother can't make it. Come back quickly. Lan Yu closed his eyes and said in a low voice, got it. I'll be there soon. He put down his phone, his eyes filled with disillusionment. He sat up straight and started the car. An hour later, when he appeared in the hospital, Mother Blue had already passed away. Lan Yu walked in quietly and looked at Bai Susu's ward. Bai Susu's mother was lying there with a layer of blankets covering her body. White cloth. Papa Lan looked at him and wiped his tears. Lan Yu. Lan Yu quietly looked at his mother, who was lying there peacefully. Is she gone? He whispered, and with a trembling hand he lifted the white cloth. Instantly, his eyes felt a little hot, and he slowly knelt down. Blue Mother's departure was very sudden. With the most advanced medical technology, she could not find out what was going on. At last, the dean had to comfort her and said, probably left with palpitations, Mr. Lan, I'm sorry. Lan Yu just stood there without moving, 3 days later, after the Blue mother's affairs, Blue father called him into his bedroom. He took out a box and placed it in Lan Yu's hand. He said softly, "This belongs to your mother." A few days before she left, she kept saying that she wanted to give it to Chin Chin. As Mr. Lan spoke, he took a deep breath and wiped his tears before continuing, "Although she's gone, I know you're going to find Chin Chin, so take this with you. It's also your mother's wish before she left." Lan Yu pursed his lips and opened the box. There was a set of sea sapphires inside. He could tell that it was his mother's favorite set of jewelry. It was probably a gift for Chin Chin. Tears welled up in his eyes. He clenched the box tightly and said in a choked voice, "Thank you, Dad." Father Lan patted his shoulder and didn't say anything. He sighed and said, "Go." Lan Yu arrived in France 2 days later. The weather in France was much cooler than in B City. He dialed Chin Chen's number. Chin Chen met him in a villa that looked like an ancient castle. Rather than a villa, it was more like a private manor. Just by driving in, it took them a full 10 minutes to get there. The car stopped. In front of him was a red and white villa that looked like a castle in a fairy tale. Lan Yu got out of the car and was greeted by layers of servants. Finally, he saw Chin Chen in a back garden. Chin Chen sat at the exquisite table and chair and drank afternoon tea. He had changed into a set of men's clothes. It was a familiar and strange smell. Chapter 2882. Chin Chen nodded and looked up at Lan Yu. Their eyes met. There was nothing but coldness in his eyes. He looked at everything around him and asked, "Do you love him or these luxurious things? If it's him, I'll let go. If it's all these things, I can give them to you." Chin Chen smiled faintly and didn't answer him immediately. Instead, she looked at the servant next to her and said, "Make a cup of coffee for Mr. Lan." The servant nodded. Lan Yu said coldly, "There's no need for that. I just have a few words to say to you." Chin Chen looked into his eyes and chuckled softly, "Say it." After saying that, she took another sip of the black tea. The original mellow taste was now bitter. Her white fingers clenched the cup so tightly that the veins were popping out. But he didn't notice it. Lan Yu stood quietly. He heard himself asking her softly, "Are you going back with me?" Chin Chen smiled. She stood up slowly. She was cold and noble, without a trace of human emotion. She was very much like Rong Lei. He thought to himself that she really enjoyed the feeling of being high and mighty. But why didn't he give up? Do you really love him so much that you lost yourself? He looked at her, his dark eyes stained with a layer of pain. Chin Chen walked slowly to the handrail and looked at the flowers in the garden. She turned around and said, "Because Lan Yu can give me everything." She looked around and said, "These are what I like and what I'm familiar with. Lan Yu, even if you have the same wealth, our pursuits are different." Finally, her eyes fell on his face and she said lightly, "I like the curry rice and paella you make, but I'll get tired of those cheap things one day." Now, are you tired of them? Are you tired of me too? Lan Yu took a step back. Chin Chen, tell me, what am I to you? A game, a terrible joke. Chin Chen tilted his head and looked at him with a smile. Think about it, a vegetative person revived, and I saved him with my own hands. He fell in love with me so much that he would die for me. How interesting would that be? The sun shone on her body, but there was no warmth at all. She was cold, cold-blooded. I wear women's clothes, I do all these things, just to make you love me more, you fool. Because you're lying in bed with Lin Cece. Lan Yu, do you think I'll let a lowly creature like you go? Chin Chen sneered. Lan Yu repeated her words, lowly creatures. Qin Chen smiled. What else? She looked at the box in his hand and stepped forward to take it. Lan Yu did not stop her. Qin Chen opened it and saw a set of sapphire jewelry inside. The light stung her eyes, and at that moment, she wanted to cry. Qin Chen opened it and saw a set of sapphire jewelry. The light stung her eyes, and at that moment, she wanted to cry. Lan Yu's voice was low and hoarse. This is my mother's gift to you. Maybe you don't need it anymore. She threw that set of jewelry into the bushes. She turned around and looked at him. Lan Yu, you were also treated like this by me. It's not a pity to throw it away. She said word by word, I have no interest in your world at all. Lan Yu's face was pale. Do you really think so? Yes. Qin Chen was still smiling, but this smile was completely unfamiliar to him. Chapter 2883. Lan Yu suddenly laughed. He looked at her and said, Ronglei doesn't care. He doesn't care that I've slept with you so many times, huh? He went forward and held her delicate chin. The veins on his forehead were popping out and the bones in his hands were distinct. She believed that as long as he squeezed hard, her bones would break. Qin Chen raised her chin and said, I don't care. It's just like how he has slept with so many women. We don't care about that. As she said that, Ronglei walked over slowly from afar. He was wearing a black shirt like her and a pair of straight trousers. His entire body was cold and noble. They stood together. Rather than saying they were lovers, they were more like real people and shadows. Lan Yu looked at them and let go with a smile. He stood with his hands by his side and said, Qin Chen, I wish you happiness. She stood beside Ronglei and smiled. I wish you happiness too. I will. There was no warmth in Lan Yu's eyes. I will forget you and never see you again. He looked at her one last time and walked out slowly. He never looked back. Qin Chen stood straight and her eyes were very hot. She wanted to cry, but there was not a single tear. Ronglei pinched her chin gently. Your acting is not bad. If I didn't know you, I would have thought that you fell in love with me again. Qin Chen pushed Ronglei's fingers away and was about to speak when Ronglei kissed him on the lips. Just when she wanted to resist, he said in a low voice, Don't struggle, he's watching. Qin Chen's eyes turned and looked at him. Close your eyes. Ronglei chuckled. But I can't guarantee that he will walk out of here alive. Qin Chen's eyes widened. Like his mother. If Lan Yu wasn't there, she would not hesitate to slap Ronglei. He was too despicable and cold-blooded. But at this moment, she didn't dare. Ronglei chuckled. His fingers gently caressed her delicate red lips as he said in a low and husky voice, Qin Chen, you look very cute. You haven't looked at me in the eyes for a long time, and you haven't talked to me properly. His voice became lower and lower. Don't forget, our wedding is in 3 months. Qin Chen widened his eyes. He raised his hand, and almost immediately, a servant came over. Sir. Ronglei's eyes fell on Qin Chen's face, but he said to the servant, Take an invitation to Mr. Lan. The servant immediately went to execute the order. Qin Chen did not stop him. No heartache. Ronglei looked at her delicate face, slowly stroked her lips, and chuckled, I thought you would stop me. No need. Qin Chen looked into his eyes. Don't forget our deal. I'll help you start the DNR program and you set me free. Of course. He leaned over and his voice rang in her ear. But are you sure that he will still want you if you're free? A woman who has been with me and is pregnant with a child. His fingers gently slid over her flat belly. Will he still believe that you are clean and that this child is his? Ronlay's voice was very soft, but when he said these words, his eyes were locked. Because there were some things that he was unwilling to admit, but they really happened. Not only did the girl he loved sleep with someone else, but she was also pregnant with a lowly creature's child. Narrowing his eyes, he turned his head and bit down hard on her lips. Chapter 2884. Qin Chen endured it without moving. Because her heart was in pain, the physical pain was nothing. The more she didn't respond to him, the more boring he would be and the less he would make trouble for her. But if she didn't respond to him, Ronglay would have a way to deal with her. He took her back to the master bedroom and tied her to the chair. Qin Chen clenched her hands and said, "What do you want to do?" Ronglay stood in front of her, held her delicate chin and sneered, "If you don't want to be my woman, then I will settle for the second best." Qin Chen opened her eyes wide and looked at him in disbelief. She had a bad feeling in her heart. And the person who was brought in proved that her guess was right. It was Lin Cece who came in. Lin Cece was changed into a transparent nightgown. Her black hair was spread over her shoulders, and she stepped barefoot on the pure white wool blanket. After she came in, she paused and looked at Qin Chen. Qin Chen pursed her lips and looked at Ronglay. "What do you want?" Her heart was trembling. The current Ronglay was no longer the Ronglay of the past. The current Ronglay was a madman. He looked at her and chuckled softly. "Qin Chen, you should know that every man has his own desires. If it's inconvenient for you, someone else will. For you, Lin Cece willingly slept with me on your behalf, including every day of our marriage. As long as you're not a real married couple with me, this girl will replace you as my venting tool." He stroked her short hair and corrected her with a smile. "No, I love you, but I don't have that kind of pity for other women." He leaned forward to look into her eyes and said coldly, "My first child must be born by my Qin Chen, so if other women are pregnant, then they can only..." After a pause, Ronglay softly spat out two words, "Get rid of it." Qin Chen's lips trembled, and his eyes fell on Lin Cece, who was behind Ronglay. Lin Cece's face was pale. She stared at Qin Chen's stomach and raised her head. "I did it willingly. It's not a loss to sleep with such a handsome man." As soon as she finished speaking, her body was thrown onto the bed. Then the pajamas were torn into pieces, which also confused Qin Chen's eyes. She was forced to enjoy the high-definition blockbuster. She looked at the gentle beast in front of her, and the person in her memory was squeezed out inch by inch. The only good memory left was all gone. Lin Cece let out a painful scream, hoarse and painful. Qin Chen clenched his fists. She could only watch as Lin Cece satisfied Ronglay for her. She had no choice. She also knew that Lin Cece didn't want her child to be aborted. Qin Chen had seen so much blood and death that she thought she would be numb to it. However, when Ronglay left the bedroom after playing with the beast Jade, she stumbled over. There was blood under Lin Cece's body. It was the blood of Tu Rough. "Qin Chen, I'm not that bad, am I?" Lin Cece's voice was weak. "I want you to be fine. I'm also glad. I didn't get off the plane. I can still protect you." Qin Chen closed her eyes. "Silly." Lin Cece shook her head. "It's okay. I've had several men, but none of them was more handsome than him. In fact, he tasted good." Qin Chen's voice was hoarse. "Stop talking. I'll apply medicine for you." Lin Cece was still laughing, but she soon fainted. She had a fever, and the wound was inflamed for 2 days and 2 nights. Chapter 2885. Lin Cece opened her eyes and looked at Qin Qin. Her lips moved a little. I want to drink water. Qin Qin held her down. I'll go get some water. Don't move. As she said that, she got up to get a glass of water and helped Lin Cece up. Lin Cece was just about to drink water when she suddenly paused. She looked at Qin Qin and bit her lower lip. I have something to give you. Qin Qin looked at her and said softly, drink water first. We'll look at it later. However, Lin Cece shook her head. There was a hint of moisture in her eyes. I know you'll like it. As she said that, she took something out. It was a very small ring with a sea sapphire. It was in Lin Cece's palm and almost pinched into her flesh. Qin Qin rarely cried. The last time he cried was because of Lan Yu. And this time, it was because of Lin Cece. Her lips moved a little and she closed her eyes slightly. Silly. Lin Cece hugged her immediately and rested her little face on her shoulder. No. I've hurt you. She used to be extremely naive. She thought that she could use Ronglei to drive Lan Yu away from Qin Qin. She thought that she could play with Ronglei in the palm of her hand. However, she was used by Ronglei. She shook her head and said softly, I don't care about that. Really? It's just sleeping with a man. It doesn't matter. However, the more Qin Qin listened, the more uncomfortable he felt. He patted her and said, drink water first. Lin Cece bit her lip. Do you like this? Qin Qin looked at the ring for a long time before he whispered, I like it. Keep it for me, okay? Lin Cece nodded and leaned towards Qin Qin. I don't want to get pregnant. Will you help me? Qin Qin nodded and helped her drink the water. Lin Cece was sick for a few days. When her fever subsided, she was summoned to accompany Ronglei again. However, she didn't let Qin Qin watch from the side, and he didn't use violence on Lin Cece again, although he was still very rough. When Lin Cece returned, another layer of skin had been rubbed off. When she came to see Qin Qin, she was disdainful of Ronglei. How could this guy have the nerve to say that he likes you and loves you? Look at how fierce he is when he climbs on top of a woman. With that, Lin Cece carefully looked at Qin Qin. Sister Qin Qin, you won't like him anymore, right? Qin Qin smiled faintly. I won't. She stroked Lin Cece's hair. Actually, you can leave. Lin Cece pursed her lips. If I had gone back then, I might have ended up like Lan Yu's mother. With that, she looked at Qin Qin and said, Sister Qin Qin, I want to go home with you. As she said that, she hugged herself pitifully and looked at Qin Qin. Qin Qin reached out to touch her head and lowered his eyes. I'll take you back. I promise. However, Qin Qin didn't expect that when she could go back one day, she would take away the last thing Lin Cece had left behind. Hearing her words, Lin Cece's eyes were a little bright. Qin Qin looked into the distance and pursed her lips. At dinner that day, Ronglei offered to take her to New York. Qin Qin looked at him. I don't want to go. You won't ignore your partner in the lab, will you? Ronglei elegantly cut a piece of turkey and smiled very elegantly. Lin Cece, who was standing at the side, wanted to cut off the flesh on his face like a turkey. She put on a fake smile and said, I want to go too. Ronglei looked at her. Otherwise, who would you use to warm the bed? Lin Cece smiled and said shamelessly. Ronglei's lips curled into a cold smile and he looked at Qin Qin. Chapter 2886. Rollercoasters gave up on the idea of making her jealous. He knew that she still had Lanyu in her heart, and she had long forgotten about him. However, he would make her give up. When their cooperation was successful, he would achieve unprecedented success, and Qin Chen would forget about that ordinary man. Rollercoasters twitched his lower lip. It's decided. Tomorrow's private plane. After saying that, he threw the napkin in his hand to Lin Cece's hand. Lin Cece understood. He wanted her to wait on him at night. He was really energetic. Lin Cece quickly finished eating and said to Qin Chen in a low voice, "I'm going. I'll look for you later." Qin Chen looked up and looked at Anna, who was standing by the side. Anna's face was expressionless, but her face was dark. Ever since her hand was crippled by Qin Chen, her master had never had sex with her again. She longed for it, but she didn't dare to take the initiative because her master had a vixen like Lin Cece by his side. This vixen wanted to suck her master's essence and blood every night, like a female beast that was never satisfied. Anna was very jealous. Her master had never been so infatuated with a woman's body before. Recently, he seemed to have started to take supplements. She didn't know that Rollercoasters wanted to let Qin Chen know how amazing he was through Lin Cece. The common problem of straight men was that they were the best in the whole universe when it came to women. Anna was jealous, and Lin Cece gave her a flirtatious look, which made Anna so angry that she was about to smoke. After Lin Cece left, Anna looked at Qin Chen, who was still eating, and said in French, "You don't mind her existence?" Qin Chen looked up and his eyes fell on Anna. He smiled and said, "Rather than you, I hope that the person sleeping next to Rollercoasters is one of us." She lowered her eyes and cut the steak gracefully. Isn't it the tradition of the Rome family to have several women to warm the bed besides a wife? There was a faint smile on her face. I heard that Rollercoasters is already very restrained in this aspect. There are very few women, and now there is only Cece. I am very satisfied. Anna was furious. She took a step forward and put one hand on the table next to Qin Chen. She said in a fierce voice, "Cunning Chinese woman, don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. You are thinking of murdering master." Qin Chen didn't mind and glanced at her. "Go tell your master." Just in time to tell him that you're still thinking of climbing into his bed when he's in danger. Anna's green eyes almost turned black. Her face was gloomy. "I will kill you." She raised the gun. Qin Chen cut his steak and smiled faintly. "Shoot." How could Anna dare? She just wanted to scare this Chinese woman. She didn't know why her master fell in love with her. It was obvious that they were neither a man nor a woman. She didn't move. Qin Chen wiped his lower lip and picked up the knife to cut the steak. He stabbed the back of Anna's hand. She was a surgeon. She knew where to avoid the tendons and bones and to stab the whole palm. Anna immediately screamed. Her screams were very tragic. "You don't have the guts." Qin Chen sneered. "I really don't know how you climbed into Rollercoasters' bed in the past." She looked at Anna's fierce waves and shook her head gently. "It's a pity that you have such a good condition." She looked like a cow and could meet all of Rollercoasters' needs. In contrast, Lin Cece was much thinner. Chapter 2887. Qin Chen grabbed Anna's hand and dripped it on the plate. "Make a velvet cake tomorrow. It must taste good. Remember to ask the chef to refrigerate it, or it won't taste good." Anna was shocked. Qin Chen smiled and stepped forward. "Save your life. Don't be treated as food by your master, okay?" After that, he left. Her bedroom was next to Ronglai's. She could always hear the sound of him and Lin Cece making love next door. He probably did it to stimulate her. However, Qin Chen really didn't feel anything. On the other hand, Cece seemed to be enjoying it. Qin Chen also believed that Ronglai had used 120% of his strength. It was just that men were too serious about this kind of thing, which seemed a little childish. Qin Chen was alone in the bedroom, leaning against the bed and listening to the sound coming from next door. She couldn't help thinking of Lan Yu. He must hate her. His mother passed away, and she said such cruel words to him. Qin Chen pulled out a necklace from her neck, which was given to her by Lan Yu before. This was the only thing she had that belonged to him. Although she had already thought of a plan to deal with it, and she said to Lin Cece that she would take her home, Qin Chen was not sure about it. What she had to deal with was not only Ronglai, but also the Rong family behind Ronglai. Just thinking about it made her feel terrible. But she had to do it no matter how difficult it was. Qin Chen was in a daze until Lin Cece came back late at night. Lin Cece rubbed a layer of skin as usual. She climbed into Qin Chen's quilt and said softly, "I heard that you pierced Anna's palm again." Qin Chen smiled and reached out to pull her hair. "She was probably jealous of you, and she felt that I didn't do anything as Mrs. Rong, so she was very angry." Lin Cece was still looking at her. Qin Chen's smile deepened. "All right, she's the one who provoked me." Lin Cece's body was tired. She lay down and hugged Qin Chen's arm. She whispered, "I know you're warning her. You're afraid that she'll hurt me." Qin Chen didn't say anything. He just quietly accompanied Lin Cece. The current Lin Cece was as helpless as a child. She always said that Ronglai was good in bed, that Ronglai was handsome, that she did not suffer any losses, and that she had gotten used to it. Actually, how could she get used to it? Every time she came back, she had to shower for a long time. However, Qin Chen didn't say it out loud. The most important thing for them now was to survive. Qin Chen lowered his head and found that Lin Cece had fallen asleep. Her little face was a little pale, and it was obvious that she was tired. Qin Chen's heart suddenly gave birth to a touch of pity. She was actually sacrificing Lin Cece. In this world, if Qin Chen died, Ronglai's ambition would not be realized. She stroked her belly and smiled softly and helplessly. This child came at the wrong time. She stayed by Lin Cece's side until she fell asleep, and then she fell asleep. Every day in France, they lived like this, as if they were walking on the edge of a knife. The next morning, Anna did not show up at breakfast. As soon as Qin Chen sat down, Ronglai said calmly, "Why did you hit Anna?" Qin Chen picked up the milk and took a sip. She felt disgusted. Did the morning sickness start? She was a little shocked, but she forced herself not to let Ronglai see it. He knew that she was pregnant, but her belly had always been flat. She didn't show any signs of pregnancy, so it didn't stimulate him. Chapter 2888. Qin Chen suppressed her discomfort and looked at him faintly. "Because she was disrespectful to me. I remember that in the Rong family, the status of servants is very low. The master can kill them at any time. Ronglai, are you not going to let me be your wife? If that's the case, I'll return home immediately." Although he knew that she was looking for an excuse, Ronglai was still pleased. His heart that was hurt by her was comforted. He smiled slightly. "Of course, you can do whatever you want to her." Qin Chen looked down. "Including killing her. Are you willing to do that?" "It's just a woman," Ronglai said indifferently and raised his hand to signal the servant. "Call Anna over." Qin Chen stopped him. Forget it. After that, she took out a bottle of wine from the fridge in the corner of the living room and poured a glass for Ronglei. Have a taste. Just then, Anna came over. Ronglei looked at the bright red liquid in the goblet and frowned. It was a familiar smell. It was the smell of blood. Chen. He looked a little uncomfortable. I don't have such a hobby, you'll like it. Qin Chen smiled and put the glass in his hand. This is my gift to you. Ronglei looked at her and finally raised his head to drink it. The mellow smell was intoxicating. It's Anna's blood. I put it in it myself. Qin Chen hugged his neck from behind. How does it taste? Ronglei frowned more fiercely and squinted at her. Chen. You don't like it? Qin Chen smiled. Anna's blood can calm your restless blood, right? Ronglei's face changed slightly. She actually saw through it. So you care about her life and death. As for whether she's crippled or not, you don't care at all. In the past, you were only with her because you wanted to drink her blood. Qin Chen hugged his neck, but his eyes were fixed on Anna. Anna's body trembled. She never knew it was like this. Master needed her blood. Qin Chen smiled even more happily. It seems that Anna doesn't know about it yet. Ronglei was really angry. Chen, stop fooling around. I won't kill her. I'll leave her blood for you to use. Qin Chen was still smiling as he gently said to Anna, you can make a request to your master. Otherwise, if you commit suicide, where would he find such a mobile blood bank? Her words seemed to remind Anna. Anna had been with Ronglei all these years. How could she stand being ignored now? So she raised her head and said, Master, I want to be your only servant. At this time, Lin Cece couldn't stand it and rolled her eyes. Don't you just want to sleep with him? Just be straightforward. What servant? When he drinks your blood, you have to kneel down and lick him. You're so cheap. She spoke in Chinese and spoke very fast. Anna couldn't understand her, but Ronglei did. He glanced at Lin Cece. In fact, he didn't care which woman he slept with, but now he was embarrassed by Qin Chen. He knew that she was helping Lin Cece, but he couldn't fight back for the time being. So he said lightly, it doesn't matter. Go to my room tonight. Qin Chen looked at him and said a few words in Chinese, I don't like her in our room. Chapter 2889. Ronglei couldn't stand her making things difficult for him. He glanced at her and said, Chen. He wanted to remind her of her identity and that he was the leader between them. But when he saw the mischievous look in her eyes, Ronglei's heart softened and he said softly, I don't want anyone. Qin Chen looked up, a little surprised, but as long as he didn't pester Lin Cece and Cece didn't have to accompany him in pain, she didn't care about the result. Anyway, he had achieved his goal. If he didn't do it with Anna, Anna's blood bank would become a ticking time bomb that could betray Ronglei at any time. Qin Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. They had originally planned to leave for New York that day, but the Rong family called Ronglei away at the last minute. By the time Ronglei finished dealing with it, it was already 3 days later. The plane from France to New York pierced through the sky. Qin Chen sat quietly with Lin Cece next to him. After resting for a few days, Lin Cece looked much better. She brought a glass of milk to Qin Chen and said, drink some milk. The plane is landing soon. Qin Chen shook his head and signaled with his eyes. Lin Cece was stunned for a moment and then understood. These days, Qin Chen had symptoms of morning sickness. She didn't want Ronglei to see it, so she ate less and lost a lot of weight. Lin Cece didn't force it. She glanced at Ronglei again. Anna probably hadn't given up yet. She wore a black spaghetti-strap dress and showed off her flirtatious side, but Ronglei didn't seem interested. Lin Cece hoped that Ronglei and Anna would get together immediately. No matter how handsome he was, she felt like she was being entangled by a cold snake when she did that kind of thing with him. It was extremely uncomfortable. However, Ronglei remained calm and looked like a qualified fiancé. Lin Cece and Qin Chen exchanged looks of disdain. They didn't believe that the Rong family's teddy could last much longer. The plane finally landed. In the parking lot outside the airport, 4 Rolls-Royce Phantoms were parked in a row. A dozen men in black escorted Ronglei and the others into the cars. Qin Chen and Lin Cece had been together the whole time, as she had requested. Lin Cece sat down and looked at the car in front of her. She chuckled and said, "That poodle probably can't control its lower half." Qin Chen just smiled and then signaled Lin Cece with his eyes. Lin Cece whispered into his ear. Qin Chen said in Chinese in a very low voice, "Are the computers ready?" Lin Cece nodded. "Everything is ready. It can be started at any time." Qin Chen's expression was calm. "At that time, I will use one account to log in all the information. You just need to use the same account to log in and destroy it before Ronglei gets the information." "Sister Chen Chen, I understand." Lin Cece nodded. "However, if we do that, won't we be game overpowered?" Qin Chen looked at Lin Cece and nodded slightly. That might be the case. She paused and closed her eyes slightly. "So, only one of me or Ronglei can survive." She had a feeling that she and Ronglei were the key people in the DNN project. Lin Cece still looked nervous. She pulled at her tight red dress and didn't say anything else. She didn't stop them because she couldn't. If Qin Chen only wanted to live for himself, he wouldn't go to New York with Ronglei. The information in the computer in New York was what she wanted to get rid of. Chapter 2890. Anna's hair was slightly messy, and there were a few red marks on her neck. She looked at Qin Chen provocatively. Lin Cece said in a low voice, "See, I told you that Ronglei is a teddy bear. He can't stand it for long." And that Anna is speechless. Qin Chen smiled faintly. Ronglei has his charm. Back then, she was young and inexperienced. She had wasted a lot of her youth and tears because she liked his charm. Wasn't Anna the same? Lin Cece also sighed softly. "Look at her, it's like she's possessed." Qin Chen looked at her meaningfully. Now, Ronglei was probably a demon. While they were talking, Ronglei walked over with a subtle uneasiness on his face. Qin Chen didn't make trouble for him. He held his hand and asked, "Is this our villa?" "It's home." Ronglei kissed her forehead. Qin Chen immediately felt a little nauseous. She covered her mouth and turned her face to the side. "It smells like blood." Ronglei's nose twitched slightly. He frowned and said, "Chen Chen, don't you often have surgery? How can you have a reaction to this?" "That's different," Qin Chen said faintly. Then, she broke free from his hand and walked towards the villa. Her reaction showed that she cared about him and Anna making love in the car just now. Ronglei was a little excited. She hadn't shown her care for him for a long time. So he walked a few steps quickly and held her hand again. "Chen Chen, you care, don't you?" Qin Chen looked back at Lin Cece and said slowly, "Cece said that you are a teddy bear. I think it's a good description." She walked forward with him and said, "Ronglei, you always want me to love you again, but," she paused and looked at him. "You always need a reason to love someone. Especially now that you're on top of me." Ronglei frowned. "You want me to give up another woman?" "Not only that, but there is also the DNN experiment." Qin Chen smiled slightly. "But I think in your heart, experiments are the most important. They can satisfy all your ambitions. But Ronglei, have you ever thought about how terrible things will happen if this technology is used on large animals in war? The world will change. There's nothing wrong with being a doctor, but respecting the laws of nature is our first principle." Qin Chen lowered his gaze. "I remember that you couldn't even bear to hurt a puppy in the past. Ronglei, if you sell this experiment, you'll be rich, but will you still be able to control everything?" Ronglei's expression turned ugly. She had seen through his plan. The Rong family in France had always looked glamorous, but it had been going downhill since more than 10 years ago. The reason why it could be maintained was because the Rong family's biotechnology company kept providing new technology to the world's military forces. That was why they could be glorious again in the past few years. The Rong Corporation was in the hands of Ronglei, and it developed like the sun in the sky. He almost monopolized the global exchange of illegal biotechnology, and DNN would be his pioneering work. The Rong Corporation's status in the world would also be improved. There was nothing the Rong Corporation couldn't do. And now, Qin Chen was obviously negotiating with him. If he gave up on the DNN project, he could have her. But how could he give up? Chapter 2891. Ronglei wouldn't give up, but it didn't mean that he would tell the truth to Qin Chen. Lying and coaxing women were a man's instinct. Ronglei smiled. "Chen Chen, let me think about it, okay?" Qin Chen looked at him and smiled faintly. She didn't say anything else. Ronglei took her into the villa and showed her around. Finally, he arranged her bedroom. It seemed that he didn't want to fall out with her, or that he wasn't interested in her appearance, or that he wasn't interested in a pregnant woman, so he still arranged for her to sleep by herself. During the next few days in the villa, he summoned Anna. When he and Anna made love, Lin Cece whispered in his ear, "Sister Chin Chin, men are so hypocritical. It's all for his blood bank." Qin Chen looked at Lin Cece with a cold look in his eyes. "No matter what happens later, at least Anna can't live." Lin Cece nodded and lowered her voice. "I know there's a gun in Anna's bedroom. I'll find a chance to get it." Qin Chen pressed her hand. "Be careful. Put it away after you get it. Don't let Anna find it." Lin Cece nodded. Days passed, and Ronglei didn't seem to be in a hurry to let Qin Chen go to the lab. Qin Chen was surprised, but she also felt uneasy. Until one day, when she read the New York newspaper, she was attracted by a piece of news. The Rome Corporation had invented a preparation that could restore the recipient's organs to the corresponding state after injecting it into humans or animals. The media named this blue substance time water. Qin Chen's hand suddenly dropped, and the newspaper slipped between her fingers. She finally understood why Ronglei wasn't in a hurry. It was because the Rome Corporation had been busy making the time water. As long as they got their hands on the DNN data, the Rome Corporation would be able to make the most terrifying drug. This was the so-called immortality from ancient times to the present. What a crazy plan. If some animal factors were added and used on humans, one could imagine how chaotic the world would be. He had been waiting for the success of the water of time. Now that he had succeeded, she was not far from going to the laboratory. She slowly walked up to the study on the second floor. Ronglei was wearing a white shirt and trousers, looking cold and noble. When she arrived, he put down the phone. Chen Chen. Qin Chen looked at him and smiled faintly. I want to talk to you. Ronglei walked to her side and helped her to sit down. He was so careful, as if she was pregnant with Ronglei's child. Qin Chen sat down and looked at Ronglei across from him. He said indifferently, I want to buy the formula for the time water in your hands. It should be called a buyout. At the same time, I want to buy out the DNN experimental project. Ronglei's expression didn't seem to be surprised. He smiled faintly and said, Chen Chen, if it was at the beginning, it might have been possible, but now it's unlikely. The water of time is already on the market, and it's on the market through legal channels. Also, Rong Bio has won the Outstanding Invention Award. Then did you make the formula public? Qin Chen looked at him. Ronglei smiled and leaned over to pinch her face. My Chen Chen, you're still so naive. Or maybe you've never been short of money. You probably don't know how you can share the technology that you invested billions of dollars to get with stupid humans. Chapter 2892. Qin Chen clenches his fists. If the Qin family isn't enough, then add the Tang family. She knows that they will all agree. That was because this invention was too terrifying. Ronglei laughed. He got up to pour himself a glass of red wine, and only then did he say indifferently, It's too late. If I don't hand over the results of my experiments, not only me, but the entire Rong family will most likely be collectively assassinated. This is a violation of the contract. Qin Chen's face is a little tense. What if I don't cooperate with you? You will. Ronglei gently shakes the wine in his glass and looks at her. And Johnson in your lab is very smart. He took the money early and cooperated with me early. My Rong company lacks such talents. I have to thank you, Qin Chen, for cultivating such excellent talents for me. Qin Chen's fingers move slightly. You'd better not act rashly. Ronglei reminds her softly, you probably don't know that the person you care about the most has also come to New York. I want to let you meet and relieve the pain of lovesickness. Qin Chen's body stiffens. Ronglei smiles and presses a switch. Suddenly, the opposite wall becomes a projection. The picture is of the airport, and the image above is of Lan Yu getting off the private plane. Ronglei chuckles. Qin Chen, let me guess, which one will you choose, Lan Yu or the world? He walked to her side, bent down behind her, and pressed his hands on her shoulders. His thin lips landed on her neck as he murmured, I guess, even if you hurt the whole world, you wouldn't have the heart to hurt this man, right? Qin Chen suddenly turns his head. You're despicable. You said you would let him go. There is an old saying in China that all is fair in war. I've already killed his mother, and I don't care about him. Ronglei gets up, walks to the opposite side, and sits down, gently shakes the red wine in his hand. Your decision. Qin Chen glares at him angrily. She rarely shows her emotions like this, and Ronglei knows that he has succeeded. She loved that man even if she had to give up the whole world. His dark eyes narrowed and there was a hint of danger in them. However, he maintained a smile on his face. There's a charity dinner tomorrow night. Lan Yu will be attending. Chen Chen, I hope you can come with me. I don't want to go. She refused without thinking. Ronglei just chuckled. I see. It was fine if they didn't want to go, but I couldn't guarantee that the scene wouldn't be filled with bombs that would suddenly explode with a bang, and then everyone would be blown to bits. They would disappear from this world, and they wouldn't even know how they died. Thinking about it, it was such a pity. Some people don't even have the chance to say, "I love you" to the person they love. Qin Chen looked at Rong Lei and said slowly, "Was the time water taken from you?" Rong Lei's expression changed slightly. Qin Chen got up and smiled coldly. "I've done countless experiments on myself and extracted the genes of countless animals to create such an unstable personality." Rong Lei, is power really so important? It's so important that you don't want to be a human and become an animal that is nothing. Her words touched him where he was hurt. Rong Lei's mouth couldn't stop trembling, and he smashed the wine glass in his hand against the opposite wall. Then he tore open the button of his shirt, walked over, and leaned close to her face. "Qin, do you think I want to sleep with a woman I don't like every night? I don't like it at all, but my body needs it. Its needs are 10 times that of a normal person, so I can't go a day without a woman, but..." There was a hint of self-pity in his voice. "But I won't have a child." His genes had changed. When he mated with a woman, the chromosomes could no longer match. Chapter 2893. Qin Chen looked at the man in front of her. He could no longer overlap with the person in her memory. As he said, he was a monster. She said softly, "Is it worth it to make yourself like this for power and for the so-called family?" Rong Lei looked straight into her eyes and smiled softly. "I regretted it before and after, but now I don't regret it anymore, and I don't have the chance to regret it. Qin Chen, if you can't love me, then there is only one other choice, which is to surrender." Qin Chen closed his eyes slightly. "What do you want?" He held her hand gently. "At the dinner party, tell Lan Yu that the child in your belly is mine." Qin Chen suddenly opened her eyes and looked at him in disbelief. "Qin Chen, I will treat this child as my own child, and even let him inherit the Rong family." He reached out and put his hand on her lower abdomen. "I can even promise you that I won't touch you if you don't want to." He pulled her closer and looked into her eyes. "Qin Chen, we are from the same world. The feelings between us can surpass everything. Believe me, when you enter this world, you will fall in love and forget Lan Yu." Qin Chen smiled coldly. "Do you mean that we can be husband and wife in name?" "I will wait until you change your mind." Rong Lei's voice became gentle. "I need this child, Qin Chen, I only want your child." Qin Chen looked down and smiled softly. "I promise you." After that, she got up and walked out. At the door, she turned her head and looked at Rong Lei. "Rong Lei, you really liked you." His handsome face changed slightly, but he didn't answer her. Only after she left did he murmur, "But I already have no way out." The next night, 8:00. When Qin Chen walked down the stairs, Rong Lei was deeply attracted to her, even though he had seen all the beauties in the world. Tonight, Qin Chen was wearing a white suit from Issey Miyake. It was the kind with the middle door wide open, and it was very slim. She didn't wear any jewelry, which only accentuated her beautiful collarbone and perfect lines. Rong Lei stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked at her with a smile. He suddenly felt that the little girl had grown up. He still had feelings for her, which were different from other women. It was just that Qin Chen could not feel it. She was the only human part of his animal nature. Rong Lei held her hand and led her to the limousine at the entrance of the villa. Lin Cece went with them. Tonight, Lin Cece was wearing a sequined fishtail dress with straps. She looked like an oriental fairy. Anna was very dissatisfied because she was not brought out by her master. 2 black Maybachs drove slowly towards a famous hotel in New York. In the dark car, Rong Lei placed a thick book on Qin Chen's lap. "Take a look. This is the auction item tonight. There is one thing that you will be very interested in." Chen glanced at him and then flipped open the book. She was stunned after only reading the first page. It was an oil painting of a woman, and the person in it was very familiar. Because it was herself. Her fingers caressed it gently, and the skin on her face trembled slightly. Chen, he auctioned your painting. You know what that means. Rong Lei's voice was calm. You and Lan Yu are no longer possible. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.